infuriates people with your stupid comments.
It's my show. Can you put the camera on me, please? He's just a co-host.
People say you do things for the ratings. They say you do things for controversy.
That David Icke's a nutter.
I love that. It's very difficult for me to talk about this kind of stuff.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the funniest thing I've ever heard.
What are you going to turn us off when you get bored?
It's out of control.
He is.
Are you watching Silent TV? Right, here we go. It's me, and who's the other side of the desk today? Is it one of our regular listeners? Is it Foxy or is it Doc? It's my right-hand man, the Doc.
The 18.
Yeah, but on the next show, it'll be Foxy, I think.
Do you?
Yeah.
I doubt it. I don't think they broadcast it. When he does it, I've not yet seen one on Sky that he's in. I think they kind of shelve those and just use the ones that I'm in. I'm sure that's what they're doing.
Well, maybe. Now, there's a few things we want to talk about today. On the serious side, there's the Tim Blackman, the Lucie Blackman case, of course, and Tim Blackman. Now, I cannot talk about this because Tim is not a friend of mine, he's an acquaintance, but my daughter and his daughter are best friends. In fact, I took his youngest daughter to school today, so I feel very uncomfortable giving my opinions on Tim, the money he's taken, people saying it's blood money. I did read the thing in the mail from Tim's ex-wife the other day. I know Tim, and I know that Tim spent an awful lot of time and money on 747s, toing and froing for this case for years and years and years, and his business suffered. Now, he has taken some money. Do you understand how this works, this money? Because, of course, Japanese law is different to British law.
It is law. Well, first of all, can I just say this, right? I think I can perfectly well see that when this kind of thing happens, and you know, tragedies happen in many people's lives. Let's say professionally, recently I was dealing with someone whose daughter was killed in an accident. Now, that family's life, as you would expect, is turned upside down.
This is you as the undertaker, not the radio presenter.
They are my family funeral business up in Hampshire. Their lives are torn apart, they can't work, you can't do anything. This terrible accident has happened to their family. Now, ultimately, I guess, if it's not the fault of the person who's been tragically killed, then it's probably the fault of, say, the other driver. And if that's the case, I would assume, like we all do, that at some point, maybe a year or 2 years down the line, the family will be paid some kind of compensation for the loss of their loved one.
Because we live in compensation culture now. In the old days, you would have an accident, and an accident isn't anybody's fault. It's an accident. We don't have accidents anymore.
No, the police, of course, in the case of a car accident, would investigate, and if they find the other driver's at fault, there would be criminal charges, and ultimately, I guess, possibly some compensation. So you could argue, I imagine, rather like the same happens in a plane crash. You know, typically, if someone's killed in a plane crash, there's like a minimum of £1 million, somewhere between £1 and £5 million, paid to the next of kin, in compensation for the person who lost their life in the plane crash. Now, just imagine that you lost someone close to you in a plane crash. How would you feel a year or two later when you had £1, £2, £3 million, a cheque, as compensation for the loss of your loved one? It's never going to bring them back. Once that's, when you're dead, you're dead. It's happened. There is no turning the clock back.
The thing with Tim is this wasn't a tragic accident.
Of course
this was a horrible crime.
And this is not something, again, in Britain we have the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board, and people do receive fairly substantial payments, even if they're injured. Now, in this case, it's Japanese law, and Japanese law says that the friends or the criminal, if they're in a position to, can compensate you, and that seems to have been for your loss. Now, we all know, those of us who've got children and loved ones, we know that you couldn't really be compensated, but the fact is this happened 7 years ago, that Tim's life was turned upside down, as indeed was his ex-wife. So she seems constantly, to me, to be in the paper, having a go. I believe that their other daughter is now estranged from the mother. I think in the Mail yesterday she said that she hasn't even spoken to her for a couple of years. There's obviously lots of family issues. These things always cause problems in families.
But have you noticed that Tim's TV work of sat with Judy and Richard, or maybe with the girls from Loose Women, or on the GMTV sofa, that all seems to have dried up after him accepting what I think was £450,000.
£450,000. I mean, but perhaps people, they need to understand that, like everybody, if this kind of thing happens to you, the guy has been over there, he's followed the trial, he's represented the family, and as far as I can see, his ex-wife hasn't wanted to do that. Otherwise, presumably, she'd have been by his side constantly in Japan as the trial has dragged on and on and on over the years. You know, there must be a reason why she's chosen not to do that, and she's not obviously very happy that he has. But, you know, if it were me, I would want to do what he's done. I would want to be there. Anyway, it is a difficult subject to talk about. The verdict is obviously shocking, but rather like British justice, you can't just say this guy murdered 5 people, so he's likely to have murdered the 6th. There must be evidence for each specific charge. I tell you what I find most fascinating, not that they found him not guilty of this particular crime. We know he was with Lucy. We know that she died. We know that we even, I think, have established legally that he was involved in the disposal of her body. But for him to be found not guilty is shocking. But I found out this morning that 99% of people who go on trial in Japan are convicted.
Really?
Think about it. 99% of all people who go on trial in Japan are convicted. Now, that presumably means that only the people they're absolutely certain are guilty get to court. I find that quite strange.
Anyway, we really, you know, we'll say something about it because it's a big local story, but I really don't want to take calls.
And I do, well, however difficult for the family, and I know I'm like you, you know, what is there to say? The truth is, this guy has been sentenced to a life sentence for the other atrocious crimes he's committed against other women, that he did cause the death of another girl. Therefore, you know, as far as I can see, there's no possibility of that evidence not being convincing. It is. There's video evidence of him committing these crimes. Therefore, whatever the family feel about the Lucy verdict, this guy is not going anywhere. He is in jail, and he will remain in jail like anyone would in any other country.
Anyway, the reason for this little talk before we get into the calls is because, can you maybe just read this one out and then...
Okay, it says, hello, Big Al. I don't suppose we're allowed to ask, but will the Obara court verdict mean refunding the blood money received by Tim Blackman? Well,
some people see it as blood money. I personally don't. I can see both sides.
What I was trying to say, and maybe I was too long-winded about saying it, as I often am, if your wife goes off in a plane and the plane crashes, the airline or its insurers will pay you somewhere between £1 and £3 million. That is a fact. British Airways, TWA, Air Canada, whatever it might be, there is a substantial payment made. If your loved one is injured in a car crash or an accident at work, there is a massive payout as compensation. No amount of money is ever going to compensate you for the loss of your daughter or son in an accident or in a murder. But that is that happens here. It's not just in Japan, it happens here.
Right, let's go to Jeff the binge drinker. Hi, Jeff. The things we want to talk about today are the GMTV phone lines fiasco. There's a rumour going around that on the big St George's Day celebration yesterday, there was a little bit of trouble. We're not talking fisticuffs. We're talking rowdiness and maybe a bit of bad language. We've had an email about that, and also we've got an email on SAGA louts, old age pensioners who are giving it a little bit of this. But what did you want to talk about?